I mean, we've heard them said before, but what exactly is a compound movement?
And they're more complex than isolation, which would be something like a bicep curl.
That one of the biggest benefits is that you get the most bang for your buck.
It's an important thing to do for beginners because it allows for them to get accelerated returns, accelerated results. I thought I could push up my way to a Brad Pitt body. Turns out there's a lot more to it than that.
Welcome to the Lucid Fitness Podcast. I'm Erik and this is Sarah, and we started Lucid Fitness to help beginners find actionable guidance in a sea of fitness and nutrition information.
Welcome back to the Lucid Fitness Podcast. In this video, we're talking about the second of the core principles, which is to prioritize compound exercises. Previously, we talked about the first core principle, which was to find a routine that fits into your life. In the previous video, we went over the means of deciding how often you should be going to the gym and using that as a means and a mechanism of deciding what sort of routine you should go on. Well, today, as a follow-up, we'll be talking more about once you figure out how frequently you're going to the gym, we're going to help you determine what sorts of exercises to be doing while you're in the gym.
Right, and if you haven't seen that first podcast episode, the link will be in the description below. So, prioritizing compound movements. Compound movements, I mean, we've heard them said before, but what exactly is a compound movement?
Compound movements are multi-joint, multi-muscle movements. They're the big movements you hear people talk about: deadlift, squat, bench press, things like that. These movements are movements that are highly efficient at building muscle. They're highly efficient at building up strength, and they give you a lot of bang for your buck in terms of time spent in the gym.
So what's the difference between a compound movement and an isolation movement?
So a compound movement generally, like I mentioned previously, they generally are multi-muscle movements and multi-joint movements, and they're more complex than isolation, which would be something like a bicep curl. A bicep curl is, a single joint, and usually it's only really hitting your bicep, as opposed to something like a barbell row that would be hitting your back and your bicep, and a multitude of other exercise or muscle groups. I think that the big distinction between the two is, complexity and difficulty. Compound movements are generally much more difficult because they're using larger muscle groups. They tend to recruit a lot more of your body at one single time in order to complete the complex movement. And so they do require more work. The second core principle being prioritize compound movements. It's an important thing to do for beginners because it allows for them to get accelerated returns, accelerated results from their time spent in the gym.
Because you're using so many muscles at once, and you're also able to lift heavier weights because you are recruiting so much more muscle on your body. Right. Is that one of the biggest benefits, is that you get the most bang for your buck as far as exercise, or are there other benefits to compound exercise?
The benefits are vast, right? And I think that the biggest one is the bang for the buck, especially with beginners who have limited time and limited coordination. There is a certain element of doing these more complex movements that help you just become more capable of a fitness person, right? And doing things that are more complex, doing things that are heavier, and doing things that are more challenging is generally in this sport something that is beneficial, right? That's the whole point in doing it. If it was easy, it wouldn't be worth doing. So by using compound movements, there's benefits in coordination, building up your coordination, your athletic ability, your power, your strength, your muscle mass, as we touched on earlier. And it creates a much more balanced and symmetric body than if you're trying to build a routine that's based entirely off of isolations. So one of the big concerns with beginners is that they often fill their routine before they know better. They fill their routine with a bunch of isolations because a lot of the vanity muscles are easier to hit with isolations, and a lot of the muscles that people want to build, it just in their head it makes sense to just follow this routine that targets those specific muscles. For guys, oftentimes it's arms. For women, it's lower body, butt type things, and it's very counterproductive in a way, because isolations, while they do target the muscle well, they're not building up the entire body in a way that's efficient, right? And so you may be getting great bicep results, but a lot of your arm size is from your triceps, and from the way your shoulders look and the way your traps look and the way your back looks. And so using compound movements allows you to bring the whole body up to a size to make your whole body look good, as opposed to these specific muscles. And so that's where compound exercises really shine, is they give you a more balanced approach to building up your body.
It's almost like if the compound movements are putting on the muscle overall over your body, the isolation movements are what we're going to use to chisel and hone those things.
Right.
But you got to actually have something to work with and have a whole build physique before we're really starting to then tweak things. What we talked about the other day, why we're going to prioritize compound movements, especially first in our workout, and as opposed to isolations. Can you talk about that again with me?
Yeah, and so the general idea is every workout should be difficult, but you're going to have more energy and more capability earlier into your workout than near the end. And so we want to put the more challenging, more difficult exercises at the beginning. They're generally, compound exercises are also usually heavier. You can usually row or bench press, whatever it may be, or squat. You can usually do a lot more weight with those than you can with bicep curls or tricep pushdowns or whatever it may be that you're isolating. And so just in terms of using your body in a efficient way, and that efficient way is to do the bigger, harder exercises first, and then kind of taper into the isolation near the end. So for example, a back and bi day, so normal pull day, you would start with your heavy rows, work your way to lat pull downs, face pulls, then do some biceps near the end for a quick example. I think that doing it in that way, you're making sure that most of your energy and most of your central nervous system, energy is going into the right movements, these complex, difficult movements, because like I mentioned earlier, they're just more efficient, right? Doing 5 sets of a compound movement's always going to yield larger results than 5 sets of isolation. Even though if you try to compare them for a specific muscle group, maybe the isolation, if we compared barbell row to barbell curl, for example, one's a complex back movement that also uses your biceps, one primarily only does your biceps. You may, over time, if you were to just do one or the other, you may get greater bicep returns from just doing the barbell curls. But with the barbell rows, you're going to get results in your back, you're going to get results in your shoulders, you're going to get results in your biceps, even though it may be less specifically for your biceps, your whole body's going to develop in a much more balanced way. And it's just, honestly, it's just going to look better.
Well, and like we talked about, we're not saying don't do isolations. We're saying prioritize. So do the compound movements first, the things that are going to build all of those, and then also do the barbell curl, right? And the reason we want to do it in that order, because if you were to do barbell curls first and then try and do a row, you're going to have a lot of taxation on your biceps that are then going to make it a lot harder to do those rows, or you're going to be doing them not with good form, or not going to be able to put enough energy and effort into them. Yeah. So we're not saying don't do them. We're just saying do them in this order, and there's a reason behind it.
Yeah, all of the words in the principle are important. Prioritize being the most important. It's like, we're not saying isolations don't have a purpose. We're making sure that your energy is spent on the things that are going to get the largest returns. Because like we talked previously in the other video, hitting those early feedback loops, those positive feedback loops are important. And doing compound exercises gets you there faster. It's just how it works. You're going to build up a much more balanced and symmetric and aesthetically pleasing body. That's just the reality of it. And you can't, at the end of the day, like, you can isolate your way to a good body, but it's going to take a lot more time. It's going to have, a lot longer, more complex workout versus just doing, compounds and then tapering down into the isolations as you go. But I think that prioritize is the right word here. We just need to make sure that we're continuously focused on these compounds. Even for us, how often do we get to the end of our pool day and our biceps are already shot? And that's an important thing to learn, is that if you're going hard on these compound movements, those isolations feel a lot less necessary, right? If we walk away from a workout having just done our main back movements, we don't ever feel like our biceps didn't get worked out, right? Even if we didn't isolate those biceps. So it gives us the more balanced whole body approach to hitting these muscle groups, and it's a lot more efficient.
Yeah. We were saying compound exercises. Can you give me a brief idea of like the top 5 compound movements that come to mind? Sure. And then maybe we can also talk about where in the app people can find these exercises, perhaps if they don't know what that looks like.
There's a lot of compound exercises for basically every muscle group. I think the core ones are the ones most everyone's familiar with: the bench press, the squat, the deadlift, the overhead press, the barbell row, like we've been talking about. And in the app, we have our recommended workout generator that does exactly this. It prioritizes the compounds for you and structures the routines based on the number of days you can go to the gym. It structures the routine in a way that can be pre-structured for you, and then you can choose. We kind of talked about in the previous video, you can choose which exercises. Like, say you just got out of a routine that was generated that was squats and you want to do deadlifts instead, you can swap out the squat for deadlift. And so what the app does well is it kind of provides the structure in a way that even if you change things, you're still functionally prioritizing the compound movements, and then you have the isolations as the supporting exercises. And so just using the generator itself, it's fundamentally has like some random properties within the constraints of an effective routine, right? I built it in a way that there's different tiers. There's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and then when you generate, it's going to choose one of these big movers like deadlift or squat, whatever it may be, and allow you to choose, if you want to swap that out, other big movements. Like, you'll never be able to swap out the squat and put in, leg extensions, because they're just tiered in a way that there's the compound movements, there's compound movements that are multi-joint, multi-muscles, but not as difficult as these big movers. Mm-hmm. And it goes down, like lat pull down would be a good example. Fundamentally a compound movement, it's using, all different joints and muscle groups, but it can't necessarily work as like a primary movement that you would get out of a barbell row or a T-bar row or a dumbbell row. Whereas it's a necessary part of the routine itself. And so the generator kind of funnels it in a way that it's already structured for you, and you can kind of pick and choose like what exercises you want to do. Like, if you feel like, this 8 weeks I want to work on my decline, you can choose, decline bench press with barbell, decline with dumbbell, decline flies, or whatever it is you may choose. And so the app is very much, especially for beginners, because I do think that it's a wise decision to follow a structured routine. And this it scratches the itch of giving you a flexible routine while also keeping you within the constraints of an effective routine, right? Because I think that oftentimes beginners, they're able to find a routine that is one or the other, right? Either too rigid but structured, or flexible but unstructured. And so the app kind of gives you a hybrid approach.
You get a little bit of that hit of novelty where you can kind of change things up, especially if you've been in a rut for the last 4 or 5 weeks, and there's enough flexibility for that, but we're still keeping you within the constraints of you're following it this way so you get optimal results.
Yeah, and it's like it's infinitely changeable too. If you get 3 weeks into a routine and you're like, I hate doing barbell rows with lat pull downs, just generate a new routine, start over, right? Yeah. They're functionally the same. And I think that's what's cool about the way we design the app is it's structured while still allowing like a large amount of flexibility, and it teaches you that the flexibility is part of the journey, right? Yeah. And you, instead of paying this $300 a month for this 8-week routine, you're getting this free, infinitely generatable routine that if you don't like, you just generate another one. Or we have the means of, once you understand the exercises and kind of the structure that we follow, you can just build your own, right? Once you figure out what exercises you like. And that's the beauty of the app, is it gives you enough input that you can learn as well. You're not just stuck on these rigid routines. You can, kind of build the routine within the structure of the Lucid Fitness principles. And that's a powerful thing to have.
Yeah, I think that definitely plays also into my next question I was going to ask. Because I've heard it before. What about if I have injuries, or if I don't know how to do the exercise? Like if I don't know how to do a front squat, like what do I do with that? What am I supposed to do then?
Well, if you're injured, I would highly recommend talking to a medical professional before starting any routine, especially a generated routine, right? We're never going to try to design a routine for rehabbing your injury, right? And that's probably a big anxiety for beginners. Is, you're saying do compound exercises, but it's a lot more difficult to do a barbell row versus a bicep curl. Most people know how to do a bicep curl, and they have dumbbells in their house where they've practiced, and maybe they've done a few different things, but the anxiety of learning these more complex movements is probably a deterrent for a lot of people. And so I think that's where the value of an in-person trainer would be valuable, especially if you are uncoordinated. Some people, never done any physical activity in their life, never played sports in high school, never done anything as an adult, and that's perfectly fine. You can start still, but to tell one of those people, hey, get into the gym and start doing this, 5-joint exercise and don't hurt yourself, that's a daunting thing to do. So there is value in having somebody teach you the movements. And there's also, if you are maybe a little bit more coordinated, maybe you've heard some of these exercises before. In the app, we have, video, we have GIFs that you can play and be reminded of these exercises. It like shows a little man doing a bench press or whatever. You just click on each exercise and you can get a quick review of what the exercise is. And I do think that there's value of getting help in the beginning, and there's also value to, sometimes you just have to try it. I think if you start out slow and you make sure you're not overdoing it with weight, then there's a lot of flexibility with how your body's not going to just get injured from doing a very, very lightweight movement and practicing the movement, right? Like most people have enough, physical capability. They can go get a real lightweight or a band or just try the movement without the weight and just practice it. Practice what they've seen online or what you've seen in the GIF on the app and just try it. I do think that there's a little element of trial and error. In fact, I would say the vast majority of people who end up spending significant time in the gym, they really don't have somebody show them. Maybe they had a friend show them, but how do you even know your friend gave you the right form? A lot of it's just learning how your body moves, right? And you could watch, humans are very capable of seeing something and then emulating it, especially once you start building up your coordination. You watch enough videos, every video is going to have different form, slightly different recommendations, and you just kind of have to learn, what works for your body. Not everyone's going to be able to keep perfect form on every movement. It's something to strive for, but aiming for the perfection often holds people back in a sense. I explained it to you the other day. There's this weird conundrum with form and increasing your weight over time, right? Because when we'll talk about this in a future video, in order to get stronger and better looking, you have to, progressive overload. You have to embrace progressive overload. The fact that you put more weight on, you do more sets, you do more reps, whatever it may be. But in order to do that, you kind of have to accept the fact that your form's going to be imperfect indefinitely. And the reason for that is because your form with 45 pounds is not going to be perfect with the jump up. Say you jump up to 85 pounds, whatever. Your form's never going to roll over perfectly because you aren't used to using that new weight. And so it's increasing your weight, accepting the fact that I need to relearn the form at this weight and then redoing it. But if you just sit here at 45 pounds and never increase your weight, then it holds you back in a lot of ways by striving to have perfect form. And there's value in proper form. And you can learn it from others. You can be taught it. You hear people talk about, or you can just deadlift, squat, bench press. But at the end of the day, things like that. And I said it before. This isn't a thinking or a watching man's sport. This is a doing sport. You have to go. You have to try, and you have to do these movements. Otherwise, you're not going to get what you need.
Yeah, and that also plays into an aspect that we talked about, which is everyone's body is a little bit different. Everyone, like how your muscle structure is, how your bone structure is, and how you're put together, your squat might look radically different from someone who has a 4-inch longer femur than you do.
Right.
And you have to get in there and kind of just do it yourself to build up that confidence of, oh, okay, this is how I'm doing it. This is what this feels like. And you might find ways to tweak that. You're doing the exercises in front of a mirror. You're checking yourself against, videos you've seen or the gift to kind of be like, oh, okay, well, if I do lean back a little bit, I feel it here, or I feel it like this, or that feels bad, or this feels good. And you can tweak that way. But if you're not actually doing it, you're never going to be able to tweak, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's an important thing. And it's something we didn't even touch on, is the fact that you can take the self-correction approach to things too, and like record yourself doing these movements and then compare, right? Look at yourself in a video versus a professional in a video, and okay, well, my butt's winking, or I'm leaning too far forward, or my back is rounding, versus this person doing functionally a perfect form, right? But what you said is exactly right. And it's why chasing perfect form based off videos will never fully get you there, is because your body is very different than everybody else in existence, right? Like in trying to do things that a professional squatter, trying to do things the way a professional squatter who likely has great squat genetics and has likely been doing the same movement, 100 times a week for 15 years, you're just not going to have the same ability to do it. You have to kind of, and we talked about being real with yourself last week. It's an important thing to do here too, and understand that it's back to the point of the analysis paralysis. Is like you can only watch so many videos before you're just kind of, you're watching videos, but are you learning? I think real learning in this sport is doing it and getting in there and practicing these movements. And if you listen to a lot of these experts, they will say it's like, yeah, having imperfect form is dangerous, and they're right, but also it's very dangerous for your body to never start, right? Because you're waiting for the perfect person to teach you the perfect form. And I would say that level of complacency is more dangerous than getting in the gym and, picking up 20 pounds and trying to do the bench press yourself, right? So I think our bodies are very adaptable. If you try to push it, right? If you try to go into the gym and do weights that are likely over your ability, yeah, you're going to get injured without proper form. Even with proper form, you very well could injure yourself trying to overdo it. But if you go in and you start slow, I think that the risk of not starting and not building that confidence and building that ability is much greater than going in there and potentially tweaking your shoulder, right? If you have pre-existing injuries, obviously, again, you should get help with that and get approved for, and definitely get somebody showing you the proper form for somebody with an injury, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
But for most people who are just like normal people, they're thinking about going to the gym, just go to the gym or build up your confidence at home, getting a small weight set, and start learning more complex movements and how to move your body and stuff.
Yeah, that falls into my next question, because I have a feeling like people are going to watch this and they're going to hear us referencing the gym a number of times. And they're going to go, well, can I do compound exercises at home? Can I do these with body weights? Can I do these with dumbbells that I have at home? What is your thoughts about that?
You can. And I think that when you're starting, it is valuable, right? I started in my apartment with some dumbbells. I just did push-ups and some bicep curls. That's pretty much it. But I think that in order to truly progress and to embrace progressive overload, you need to have more weights. You need to have more equipment. And there's a whole nother world of calisthenics, which would be body weight exercises. But Lucid Fitness, we don't really preach the principles of body weight routines. While they do work, it, in my opinion, makes it much more difficult to progress. There's something to be said about people who are rehabbing an injury doing body weight, or people who are elderly, or people who are severely overweight, like learning to control the weight they already have. But for the average person looking to look better naked, you're going to get much, much faster returns by going to the gym and using compound exercises to build up your whole body, right? And those compound exercises can be done at home. But again, to properly get better over time, you have to increase the weight. And in most cases, people have a set or two of dumbbells. They don't have like a full set of dumbbells to be able to continuously improve, which is an important part of it. We'll talk about more next week. And so while I do think it is a possible thing, right? You could build a whole routine around, just lifting things around the house, like bench pressing a couch or whatever it is you want to do. But at the end of the day, I think that there's, beyond the aspects of being able to embrace progressive overload a lot more in the gym, there's also the mental aspects of going to the gym. There's the community aspect of going to the gym. And it's why it's, in my opinion, so important to acclimate yourself with gym culture. Is it can be very motivating for a lot of different people, but it's also a very daunting thing. But doing these compound exercises at home are possible, but it's a lot more efficient to just go to a gym.
Yeah.
Right. Not to mention the aspects of being able to see other people do these movements, right?
Yes.
I haven't even brought that up. Like there's watching videos to learn form, and then there's seeing in real life that person's doing a bench press, right? Like I'm seeing with my own eyes somebody doing it, and it makes it a lot easier to emulate that and to go and do it yourself when you're right next to somebody who's actually doing it, right?
Well, and not to mention, I know from my experience in the gym, from your experience in the gym, a majority of the time, if you are new and you're going to the gym and you're seeing someone else doing the exercise that you need to do, you can ask them.
Right.
You can ask them to show you how to do it.
Right.
And most people are going to be, obviously read the room, right? If someone's got their ears covered and they're zoned in, but a majority of the time people are waiting for their next set and they have a bit of time, and you can ask them like, how do I do this? And they will happily walk you through how to do it.
Yeah.
And that can be valuable to, like we said, that gym culture.
Yeah. There's nothing more satisfying as somebody who goes to the gym regularly and is seeking gains. There's nothing more satisfying than having someone come up and ask you how you're doing something or ask you for advice. It means a lot to these people because they put in the effort and the energy. And so a lot of the times, 9 times out of 10, the person you're talking to is going to be, more helpful than you can imagine. But I also understand, like, not everyone's that extroverted can go, and especially you're already dealing with the anxiety of going to the gym when you're new and stuff. And so again, like, I think that the most valuable thing you can do to get started is, get the Lucid Fitness app. And then if you're unfamiliar with these movements, get somebody to show you, either, a friend, a family, hire a personal trainer. A lot of places, they have a free personal trainer.
A lot of gyms have personal trainers.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so that's kind of the most, I guess, introverted path you take, is just have somebody you already know. You don't really have to, you can get out of your comfort zone. They kind of take you by the hand and kind of walk you through what they do, right? But that's also one opinion. And I've brought many, many different people to the gym with me, and I've taught them what I do. And at the end of the day, what I teach them may not even be the best thing for them long term. But what I do give them is I give them the confidence to go and feel out the gym and realize it's not as crazy scary as you'd think. And so going with a personal trainer, someone you know, is always a good approach. And then we mentioned earlier, the middle ground is filming yourself and then comparing yourself, or maybe just the act of filming yourself, maybe giving you a better attention to the detail in terms of your form.
You're more conscious because you're filming yourself. So you're thinking about bracing your core, and you're thinking about, now I'm rounding my back and then a lot of those things kind of fall in place when you do that, for sure.
And that's one of the big things with compound movements, is they do take, it is a skill, right? It is something you have to learn. Most people who haven't been in a gym before aren't going to be 100% comfortable with these movements. And everybody you see in the gym, they went through the same journey, right? They didn't know how to do compound exercises, or they started with machines only, or they started with cables only, or they started with, calisthenics at home. Everybody has the same starting journey, right? I thought I could push up my way to a Brad Pitt body, and it turns out there's a lot more to it than that. And I think that it's important that you start, right? Even if it's at home or if it's at the gym, I think the gym's more efficient for sure, especially when you're starting. Just, take the first few weeks that are going to be anxiety inducing for everyone. Anyone who's ever done it, the first time you set foot in a gym, it's daunting. It's uncomfortable, but it's kind of indicative of the sport as a whole. Is none of it's really comfortable.
Growth isn't comfortable.
Right.
It never is. And you also can't expect yourself to walk in there and do it and know how to do it right if you've never done it before. It's a practice. You continue practicing doing it, and then you become proficient at it.
Sure.
Absolutely. So I think that's a really great segue for us to go into talking about, because I know for me, and compound movements and compound exercises, that can play a big role in life outside of the gym as well. So let's kind of now that we're towards the end of the podcast here, let's kind of go into talking about how these things can also help your life outside of the gym.
Right. It's the idea of functional strength, right? If you go to the gym and you're able to pick up hundreds of pounds, it's going to make some things that you do outside of the gym easier,
Yeah.
You know, it's the benefit. I don't think many people would go to the gym and, work out and try to get stronger and stronger if it had no bearing on their actual life. And so you kind of tunnel vision what can I do? What's my PR in the gym? How much can I lift in the gym? And it's often lost on people of how much better they feel outside of the gym, how much stronger and more capable they feel outside of the gym. And I think that's part of the massive benefit is in terms of mental health, physical health, capability, the functional strength that I mentioned, doing things in the gym, they directly correlate to your quality of life.
Absolutely. Yeah. How well you play with your kids.
Mm-hmm.
Are you the person that can help somebody move their house when they're moving and like doing your own like yard work or house maintenance and that sort of stuff. Like you're developing a lot of physical skills and coordination that can make your life in general, even if it's I carry all my groceries in from the car instead of having to make trips, right? And it's those sort of like mental wins and those mental things that are hugely beneficial of compound movements.
Yeah, it's once again, it's a positive feedback loop, right? You get stronger in the gym, you get stronger in your real world. You realize the importance of that strength, whether it be mental or physical in the real world. And then that feeds back into having good gym sessions because over time you kind of connect the two. And at first you have this idea. It's like, okay, well, if I go to the gym and get healthier, I'll feel better, right? But part of the game is until you achieve that level of health and that level of fitness, it's hard to conceptualize what it feels like to truly be that way, to have that higher level of energy, to be able to play with your kids with that intensity and that consistency, right? Because anyone can go and, play once a week with their kids in the yard, but once you reach a certain level of fitness, it's like that becomes less of a thing and more of a lifestyle, right? And that's what we're trying to teach is building up that lifestyle of being just more active and more fit and more capable in general. And that's all built off of, to take it back to the core principle, it's all built off of compound movements, right? Bicep curls, they have a place, but nothing's going to make you feel more powerful than doing a heavy squat, doing a heavy deadlift. And those are the sorts of things that are going to build that functional fitness for the rest of your life and make things better, right? Improve your quality of life.
Absolutely. Major improvement for quality of life and quality of life going further into your older life, right? How coordinated you are, how your nervous system heals over time, how you have those micro-stabilizing muscles that all work together become increasingly more important as you get, into your 60s and 70s and 80s. Those are where people see a huge drop off if they weren't conditioning those things.
Yeah, the earlier you start, the better, pretty
Absolutely.
much. And, injuries aside, this sport is often, it leads to injuries a lot of times, right? But I think that it's usually riskier to be complacent and to be not physically active than it is to be in the gym and, lift for a long period of time.
Absolutely.
I think that the quality of life improvements are vast. Like you mentioned, going to the old age, quality of life becomes everything, right? Because what's the point in living to 80 if you're not mobile or you can't, walk with your grandkids or you can't play with your grandkids? And so thinking long-term in the future, that's what we're trying to do at Lucid Fitness is build this foundation so that it's less of a thing and more of a lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
And so prioritizing the compound movements, it's going to have an impact on all of your life, now, in the future, in the very far future, it's going to improve it.
To summarize, prioritize compound movements in your routine. It's something that is going to be the most efficient way for you to build strength and muscle, especially as a beginner. But as we said, also something that's going to continue in aiding your life for the rest of your life. And that's something at Lucid Fitness we really want you to understand. This is a lifestyle. This is something that can be with you for the rest of forever. All those good feelings of I feel better and I eating better and I'm able to do the things I want to do is something we want you to be able to continue on with the rest of your life.